I'm involved with the biosecurity situation in the southwest of France right now. They are dealing with 3 high-path AI, and I decided to put on this front slide lesions caused by H5N1, N2, and N9 as we speak in France. This slide, except for regional biosecurity, I'll get to that at the end, covers a lot of what I'm going to talk about, which is people, because it was mentioned. I mean, I always say that the largest rodent vermin that we have is often people out there on farms. And, you know, Dr. Clifford was talking about the importance of putting up gates. I would like to be a little bit more precise there and say the devil is in the details, you see. This is a gate. So there is a gate. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to do the job. Okay, and so we'll be talking a lot about compliance. As I was preparing for this talk, I decided to look at the literature of what's out there about what you've been going through. I used to be in North Carolina and in Minnesota, but I've been back home for the past 11 years, and so I was looking for material and actually found a short paper from Australia. They must not have any problems there because they're looking at your problem. And they summarize basically what's going on recently. And they had these statements that I thought were interesting. Are talking, of course, about waterfowl, biosecurity breaches. We'll talk a lot about that. Unusually high wind speeds. I was asked to investigate the H7N3 situation in Mexico 2 years ago, and as I was going from site to site, we had a driver who, every time we would arrive someplace, he would have like a machine to power wash essentially the vehicle, and I could feel the droplets on me as I was going from the car to the buildings. And I had an instrument to measure distances, and I felt like I was in Niagara Falls. If you've been to Niagara, you feel these little droplets on you. I could feel it all the way for 243 feet. So, of course, you may have a bug that's more or less airborne, but when you have strong winds and material, it could certainly be carried for a fair distance. They were mentioning that they had spread from farm to farm, but not necessarily from barn to barn, and they say this is really confusing. Now, the question remains, is it possible to keep AI from poultry premises? Dr. Clifford this morning said yes. Okay, it was a bit of a party pooper, if you don't mind me saying. Stealing my... one of the things I was going to say. So I concur, it's possible. There's been a lot of work done in Holland and in Europe and in Canada, of course, in BC, looking at these outbreaks. And we know that if you have a distance of less than 1 kilometer between barns compared to 10 kilometers and more, you're 30 times more at risk of getting a transmission. So we know that farm density is a big deal. And it's the same thing in Asia as well, by the way. Work in Denmark also found the same thing. We always say AI is highly contagious, and of course, here's the proof. You have a lot of farms in the same place. It's going to potentially travel. But the thing is, it's true for bugs that are maybe infectious, but not that much contagious. Like E. coli, for example. So here's data from, well, Newcastle, that's contagious, but Salmonella, Newcastle, E. coli. If you have a lot of farms in a small area, you're more likely to get transmission. Even E. coli. As I said, that's infectious, but that's not much contagious. Okay? So obviously, we need to look at how it may be getting from farm to farm through eggs, equipment, people, vehicles, etc. We already have a lot of research done on AI, by the way, looking at biosecurity breaches. Okay, it's nothing new. We know that just having visitors is a risk. Odds ratio of 8. Clothing, not managing clothing, boots, washing hands. Study in Japan, odds ratio of 7. Sharing equipment, 30 times more at risk. And you know, I present that kind of stuff. I presented this to a bunch of molecular biologists, and one of them said, "Are you telling me that in 2016, you guys in the field are still trying to get people to change boots or wash their hands?" And I said, "Yeah, mothers do that every day. They've been doing it for generations, and we're still struggling with these things." So that's a big issue. We were saying this morning that traditional biosecurity cannot prevent AI from getting in. I won't go that far. If it's not applied correctly, of course, we're going to have a problem. Now, this is data from Georgia, and this is about as good as it gets, and it's actually overestimating reality. So you have biosecurity measures here, you know, washing hands, using coveralls, foot baths is worthless, and I'll talk about it later, but it's okay. Plastic boots, shoe covers. Look at the percentages, okay? Not a bad study because it's based on what's reported. But I can guarantee you there's no way 4 men out of 5 wash their hands on a regular basis, okay? There's no study that could demonstrate something like this, all right? And what's remarkable also is you see that farm personnel will not behave like visitors necessarily. They don't feel that they need to comply as much regarding biosecurity measures because they are hired by the place. It's like the owner, which I've been in the United States doing an audit, and guys, the top leadership from a company would not shower in and out compared to everybody else. And the argument was that they knew where they were coming from. Okay? So when you have situations like that, you know you've got an issue. And we've got plenty of data demonstrating the problems with biosecurity compliance. Okay? I'm going today to show data from Quebec, but I can guarantee you that I could, and I just have half an hour, but I have data from North Carolina, from Ontario, from Mexico, from everywhere else. Wherever you get people, you're going to get the same kind of behavior. Okay? So it's not because it's coming from up north, where apparently there's a lot of bad things, right? I was looking at the geese and all that. Well, there you go. Talking about North Carolina, look at this. I investigated Mycoplasma gallisepticum. Okay? 62%, basically we had a case, we would go to a neighboring farm with birds at risk, same age, but without a problem. We asked them basic question, changing boots or wearing coveralls for visitors. 62% of those who had a problem said no, versus 12% for the farms that did not have a problem. Okay, so we're not talking high-tech issues here. We're talking, you know, changing boots, wearing coveralls. So we know that these are big, important factors. Another one that historically, and we have several studies on this regarding AI, is rendering. Going farm to farm to pick up dead birds, odds ratio of 7. This is from a study done 2002 and 3 when we had it in Delmarva. It was a low-path AI causing up to 40% mortality. So we did pay attention back then. So those are important risk factors. Darkling beetles, neglected. You'll find everything in darkling beetles, and we have found AI as well. There's no transmission studies that have been done, but we've done work on coronavirus, and we know that these bugs can carry coronaviruses for at least an hour. And we know they can travel for a mile or 2. We found up to 17 different pathogens there, viruses, bacteria, protozoas in darkling beetles. They're very resilient animals. Well, bugs. That's the nice thing. You know, there's no committee for the protection, welfare of bugs. So we took these darkling beetles and we put a bunch in pure bleach for 10 minutes. 15% of these bugs survive that. Okay, the idea is we want to know if these bugs were transferring as fomites, basically on, you know, they're in shit, really, right? So if it's contaminated, you would say they're just like a mechanical vector, and that's it. And we want to differentiate this with being more like biological vector with the virus inside their gut. Having graduate students, which is a great thing, we got them to actually dissect the gut of these Darkling beetles after putting them in bleach. And we could identify a lot of pathogens this way. So they're not only on the surface, they're inside these bugs. Flies. Flies in Asia, we know it can be a method of AI transmission. This is actually from North Carolina, where I was using fly spec cards to assess basically the growth of the fly population on a farm from placement to 6 weeks. Look at this, it can be exponential. And a study was done in Asia. It was very interesting. They took contaminated material, put flies for 15 minutes only. Okay, they had a control with no AI in there and fed that to chicken. Nothing happened. 15 minutes exposure to these flies to this contaminated material, then given to the chickens. They were all dead on average within 4 days. Okay, so they did another group where it was 15-minute exposure. Then they moved these flies with manure that was free of AI for 24 hours, then fed it to chickens that were all dead within 5.6 days. So, and a study in Japan could show that 30% of the flies captured 2.3 kilometers away from infected sites were positive. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that they could transmit the virus to commercial poultry. But it's troubling when you see this. Now, I know that when you start having problems in the United States, it was not necessarily a season where you would have flies going around. But still, these flies can go on their own for a good 4 miles in a day. I've seen flies going 60 miles in a day. Okay, I know because I drove them. Okay? If you go to farms, what happens if you crack the window open in North Carolina? It's so warm and humid and all that. You go back with a full flock of flies. Okay, so that could be an issue. But we have integrated pest management and we have basic biosecurity to deal with things. And I'm not convinced that if we would apply these things correctly, we would not have a major impact on preventing AI from getting in. So this morning we're using a different terminology, but here is basically a farm with 4 buildings. You have a house, it's not a poultry house, it's a people house, a shed, dead bird disposal right here. What we'd like to talk about in Canada is controlled access zones, or CAZ, and restricted access zone. Okay, basically where you have the birds, that's restricted. All around, you need to have a controlled access zone. That doesn't mean you need to fence that area, mainly if you're looking at just meat birds. But it's got to be an area where you have some control. And of course, you need to have good control access points. And this is where we have major problems. And I'll focus a bit on this today. Okay, so how do we get in? This morning, they were talking about the Danish Entrance. Well, here's a classic Danish entrance. It's the same principle as a shower, right? Now, on many farms, I see showers that are dead end. That doesn't work. If you're contaminated, you go clean yourself and you get out on the same side. That's not very useful. So we're talking about 3 zones, a bit like a shower in, shower out situation. Here it's in U. Okay, so you have the outside, you remove shoes, coats, and then you go and wash your hands. In most farms that I go and do audits and stuff like that, they may have a place to wash hands or use alcohol gel, but it's never in the right place. Basically, people get their shoes off and all that. They go and they put on the shoes from the farm and the coveralls from the farm with their contaminated hands, and then they wash their hands. Okay? That's a big issue. In Canada, I have designed this 3-zone entrance, which basically can be totally dismounted. You can see here when you want to clean. And the principle here is that you have benches so that you can go decontaminate equipment, sit down, remove shoes, go on the other side, wash your hands, and then go put on the boots from the farm and the coveralls from the farms after you wash your hands and all that. It's you need the place to do it. Some would say it's expensive, but it pays. So, I mean, you can look at it this way. You can say, well, that costs money, but at the same time, if it saves you money, I think it's a good deal. Now, that we know works. We also know what doesn't work. So, I already kind of mentioned something about foot bats. They're worthless. They're actually less than worthless. Okay? Essentially, and we have data on that, mainly Cindy Amos. Works with pigs, has done great studies on that. These are pictures I've taken on farms in the United States. Okay, there's one, that was before we had all these iPhones and all that. I had one where I found 14 dead frogs in one of these foot bats. Okay, you cannot make this up. All right. Well, studies, when they did the study, they could demonstrate that you actually admit contamination using foot bats under commercial field conditions. Now, if you have foot and mouth, USDA comes in, they put everything correctly, and they do things by the book with the brushes and remove all the organic material, they have everything, yeah, it works. But I haven't seen this on farms in Canada, United States, in 12 countries where I've done consulting. I just haven't seen it. Okay, so that's an issue. You're using foot bats, that's what you're doing. Okay, essentially. You're actually increasing the humidity needed for bugs that are on your feet to actually contaminate the environment. So I mentioned that compliance is a big issue. We looked into it. As I said, I've got a lot of data from the US, but not as good as this one, because this one we filmed people. On 24 farms, I filmed 1,500 people coming in and out during a 2-week period, and then 6 months later, on the same farms, about 1,200 of them. So, how did we do that? First of all, we had to go through the ethics committee. And they said, you can absolutely do that, but you need to tell people they're going to be filmed. I said, that's not fun. Okay? I want them to not be surprised, actually. I don't want even them to know that I'm filming them, because I want them to be natural. So they said, well, you can put a decoy camera, a bogus camera somewhere, and if they assume that this is a camera that's filming them, that's a problem. And you can put a camera elsewhere. I thought, that's ethical? They said, yes. So, I love my job. So we hired a technician from CSIS. CSIS is our Canadian CIA, and I said, okay, I want to film people and don't want them to know. They said, that's really no big deal. And basically, so we said we're going to have 3 groups. One, a control group, where we ask the grower what are the measures that are in place, and we say we're going to put a poster so that they know for sure. Okay, so it's kind of an intervention, but just a poster. And then we had the hidden camera. So where was the hidden camera? Basically, it could replace a screw by a wide-angle camera. And it looked like a screw. And this is the kind of image you would get from, you see there are 4 screws with this piece of equipment? Well, one of them was actually a camera. Okay? So if you put your finger up your nose or anywhere else, I could see it, essentially. All right? So that was the control group. Then audits. We say audits are good. So I said, okay, fine, we're going to do audits. In Canada, they do audits like twice a year, and they call ahead of time. Okay, I don't think that works. So we figured we'll do at least 3, okay, and not just 1 or 2. And we're going to have a sign saying, you know, we're going to audit you regarding biosecurity. And then we had a visible camera. So that's totally bogus, of course. It didn't work. It had little lights and all that kind of stuff, but it did nothing. We had the camera hidden elsewhere. And it was funny because you see people going like this, you know, and they were just quite innocent about it. And we had big signs saying, "You're being filmed. Be careful." Okay. And so, the first 2 weeks after putting this up, and then 6 months later. And we actually worked with an industrial psychologist whose job is to work with banks. Banks like to know within their staff who should get access to the cash and who should be working elsewhere within the bank without direct access to cash. So he says, you know, it's all about personality traits. So I said, well, maybe there's a link for compliance and biosecurity. Personality traits, I mean. So we did work on that as well. So I'm just going to show you a few slides. I've got plenty, but just a few. You know, they say there's 50 ways to leave your lover. There's 44 different biosecurity breaches possible just getting in and out of a building, of a barn. Average of 4 different errors per visit, and we had a very talented individual who made 14 different mistakes, okay, as he got in and out of a barn. With 3% of the visits were perfect. Most of the problems, the zones are ignored. So we have 2 zones or 3 zones, it didn't matter. People did not respect them. Okay. We had some with foot baths, and we had a nice video of a guy who puts 1 foot in the foot bath, but the other foot goes over. That was interesting. All sorts of things like that. My graduate student, a nice lady, one day called me on a Friday and she said, "You men are disgusting." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "I'm looking at a video of a guy who's peeing in the sink right now." And I said, "Okay, so." Makes sense to me. Boobs, 14%. Washing hands, big deal as well. All right. Top 5 errors. Not washing hands. 80% of people were not washing their hands. And by washing, in some cases, it was just to apply the gel, okay, that was available to them. So when I read that 80% of people somewhere in the world are actually doing it, I don't believe it. We have research in bathrooms showing that there's no way, you know, we get these percentages. Zone ignores 2/3. Not wearing farm boots. Now, in Canada, coast to coast, there are 2 measures that have to be applied on all the farms in Canada, poultry farms. It's changing boots between barns and signing a logbook. So you see, over half the time it was not done. Not wearing coveralls. Now, you see, you may not see it, but there's a bird there. Doors kept open. As a matter of fact, that's the car from a vet. Okay, you got in, left the door open, and some. So maybe you don't get big ducks in, but you can get other types of birds in. So overall biosecurity, what did we get? Between control groups, about 35 to about 60% first 2 weeks with the visible camera, and this is the audit. Of course, we were not working for the companies. Okay, so we had no power over the employees. But my graduate student would go to the farm, talk to the employees and say, "Okay, I want you to tell me how you get in and out of a building." And they would show her how to do it perfectly. But she had them on tape, not doing it at all. Okay? So you can ask, but you're not going to get the truth. And then, of course, after 6 months, cameras are useful. But if you do nothing with them except just putting them once, that's why reality TV works. Okay, people forget about cameras. Here is compliance for changing boots, getting into a barn. Look at that, almost 100%, 94% with visible cameras at first, but then it drops quite a bit 6 months later. In Minnesota, I've been on a farm where they're using the camera to get video clips on a regular basis to teach employees when they see breaches. Now that can work. But just putting a camera like that, it becomes part of the environment and people forget. Now these percentages, 30 to 60% overall compliance, That's what we get, no matter the state, the country, or the species, okay, including humans. Medical compliance in the human medical field is a huge problem, and they have the same percentages than us. Okay. So why do we behave like this? There's all sorts of reasons. Lack of knowledge on biosecurity, that's huge. A lot of programs are designed to train technicians and sometimes owners, farmers, but not their employees. I've been on a farm in the United States where we had to speak Spanish because they were all Mexicans. And one guy came to us and he said, "Thank you for talking to us." And I said, he said, "I've been here 15 years. And you're the first person talking to us." So I said, "You mean you've been working for this company for 15 years and nobody's talked to you about biosecurity before?" It's no, nobody has talked to us. He said, "For example, they told us tonight, you're in the main office. We didn't know why. We thought maybe we're going to be fired. We had no idea." So nobody tells us anything. So that's a huge problem. And if they do something, they think that they're kids. Adults do not train like kids. Okay? There are differences there. I don't have time to get into it, but it's huge, that thing. Of course, you have economic constraints, lack of training. So lack of time, that's an excuse. Difficulty to apply suggested measure. Look, this is a 2-zone. Okay, that's in Quebec. That's not in the United States. This is the door. Now, it's minus 25. You got a coat. Okay? And where do you put your coat? How can you comply? If you are, I've got sometimes 5 students with me. Unless you work for the Cirque du Soleil, there's no way you can make this work. And look at this. This is a 2-zone. Can you see the zone? You need to be creative to see the zones, right? The line is there, and I think it goes like this. And you'll see Darkling beetles going on either side. When you see this, people look at it and say, "Come on, if the Darkling beetles can cross, I can cross as well." Okay? Often, absence of audits, lack of coherence, that's what I mean by that. And then there are like education, experience, personality traits. I've got data on this, but I'm going to focus on personality traits. Whoever we are, okay? We can be from Pakistan, from New York, sometimes the same thing, but from Canada, from Quebec, it doesn't matter. We have the same personality traits. We have 25 traits. And we looked into it, and we found 3 associated with compliance. Okay? Responsibility, complexity, action-oriented. Essentially, when we look into it, and here is data for boot compliance and overall visit compliance. And these are like essentially odds ratios or equivalent here. It's just a little bit over 1, but there are 12 levels. So if you look at 2 extremes in terms of personalities, well, on the positive side, some with the right personality traits will comply at least 12 times more than the other ones. Okay? I think that can be very useful for several reasons. To select employees when hiring, okay, mainly in the United States because you have an integrated type companies. Evaluation of current employees so that you can maybe change job assignments. And of course, for proper incentives and training. Somebody mentioned incentives. This thing about the prisoners, for example. That's an incentive to do the job right. Okay? And these things are important. And it doesn't have to be a lot of money. It could be something else than money. But that's very important. And also for the training. If you get to know these adults that need to work there, then you're in a better position to actually custom design training programs. And the key thing is, if there's a topic where reinventing the wheel is a good thing, it's biosecurity. You could come and say, "I'm the big cheese. I know about biosecurity, and I'm going to design your program. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to make sure you follow it." It's not going to happen. Okay? There's no buy-in. It's not coming from them. you get employees to say, well, maybe we could do this, do that, then they're going to be involved in it. It's their program. So that's a very important thing. Now I'm going to switch and finish with this regional biosecurity. This morning, I asked a question about this regional biosecurity, and I was misunderstood. I've got a daughter's a psychologist that says that it's frequent with me. I get misunderstood. I was not talking about regional biosecurity in terms of, are we prepared to know where to bury the birds if we have a problem? I'm talking regional biosecurity to avoid having to bury the birds, to avoid having the problem to start with. For the past several decades, we've had data showing that the bigger the farm, the closer they are to one another, the bigger the problem. Okay, this is not new at all. This is data on mycoplasma. This is in swine, Goodwin, 85. We already had data on that, and we have plenty of data in poultry now about this particular situation. All right. Now, when I investigated in Mexico, here I had a situation. This could be Duplin County, North Carolina. Okay? You see all the farms? Some people will think that if you do good on farm biosecurity, on each one of these farms, at a regional level, you'll be fine. Okay? No. You cannot biosecure a region by only biosecuring each farm. Okay? It just doesn't work this way. Okay? Now, and I'm an epidemiologist, so this is how I present. This is a picture from my neighborhood when it was minus 30. At that temperature, I don't have to tell you if it's Celsius or Fahrenheit. You know, it's freaking cold. It is so cold that when you have a bit of humidity, you can actually see the wind. You see it is going from farm to farm. Now, business-wise, okay, there are 3 farms here. All right? Now, nature, including viruses, bacteria, and protozoas, see things a bit different. Okay? You have one big site. After the 2004 AI situation in BC, they brought me there to give talks and look into it. And I visited farms where sometimes you had less distance between 2 barns from 2 different farms than between barns from the same farm. And at one point, I had 3 like that. I said, you know, you guys are in it together. I'm not talking controlling coccidiosis. I'm talking AI, mycoplasma, ILT, these conditions. Please talk. You've got to talk, okay? So you don't share all your things, but at least try to work together in terms of regional biosecurity, okay? Because accounting and biology, there are 2 different things. The good news is in the United States, you're well set up, right? This is from Georgia, where they are looking at ILT outbreaks, looking at GPS, GIS technology to determine routes for vehicles, for vaccination zones and stuff like that. Yes, you do that when you have a problem, but you can do that when you don't have the problem as well. What's preventing you from organizing routes in a region between companies to minimize the risk of getting a problem? All right? So you don't need to have a pathogen to actually use this technology. And it doesn't have to be high-tech. When it's confirmed, you get these quarantine signs, right? Yeah, that the state will put. So this is one because there was like MG on that farm. Well, Goldsboro Milling, for example, is using what they call the pink screw. Okay? What it is, it's a simple sheet. It's pink with a big plus in it. It's laminated. And farm managers and technicians have the right to put at the entrance the pink screw if they think something's wrong. If they think that something's not exactly right. They don't know why. They're just concerned about it. Okay? That's an immediate information for people who are in poultry there. They know that even if the feed guy shows up and he has to feed the bird, so he's going to go with his truck anyway, but he knows that now he needs to go and get decontaminated. If he was planning on going to another farm, he cannot do that. He knows that immediately. And on top of that, they have a long list of 26. It goes all the way to the state veterinarian in some cases, if it's a reportable disease. A list of people in their organization that should be contacted so that they can plan in case there's something. And they said to me, 9 times out of 10, it's nothing. Well, we're happy because we're testing our system. It works. And if we have a problem, we will limit it to one site. That's the idea. Okay, depopulating one site is not a big deal. When you have to depopulate, what you had to do over there in 2015, that's different. I'll finish quickly with newer technology. If you want compliance, you try to make it exit-proof as much as possible. So an example is, and I have no money invested in this, by the way. Okay, I'm not getting any money. It's a small company, Be Seen, Be Safe. They're doing, right now, a pilot study on 900 farms where they are geofencing all the sites. Okay? And all the employees, technicians, anybody, utilities companies, they all have intelligent phone, iPhone, Samsung, these things. And they have an app working in the background. And every time they're crossing a geofence, the information is being sent, downloaded real time, even to the grower. And if we're in Canada, he's probably at Tim Hortons. If you've been to Canada, that's where we have coffee and donuts. But he will get that real time. A complex manager would as well. Okay, with information, because that's really interesting. What they've done is for each person that has to go on the farm, there's a difference if you have a technician that gets inside the restricted zone versus somebody who should be outside. So they have 3 levels of risk: high, yellow, and green. So when they get that information, they know who got there, when, how long they stayed, and their risk level. And they can actually do traceback, immediate traceback, and they even have the capability, so they have the information here. So this is basically here they know this is coded, but this is one person who's gone on all these farms, these dates, and the duration of his or her visits. Okay, each person knows that. And they have the ability to trigger a mechanism to call these people immediately, all at once, to let them know, be careful, we have a situation. Okay? So when I'm talking about regional biosecurity, I'm talking about communicating, getting together, and looking at it globally, not necessarily when we have a problem. Another tool they're working on is syndromic reporting. They're going to get veterinarians and non-vets, people in the field, to report. Vets can report specific diseases as a possibility. Non-vets will report clinical signs. And it's this is an example with birds in Toronto, okay, to make sure that we would not offend anybody. Basically, it's county-based, and you get syndromic information coming in. So you can quickly see if you have a cluster of people reporting diarrhea, for example, on farms. So that allows you to gain important time to react and basically contain a problem on instead of waiting to have more sites infected. So essentially, what are we talking about? I'm finishing with this. It's a paradigm shift. Okay, the reason why we're at this right now, and it was said this morning, the poultry industry in the United States in particular has been extremely successful, as is huge. Even on some sites. So now we need to look at things a bit differently. In the past, you could focus on individual farm measures, variable traffic flow, minimal communication. Often companies will not talk to one another. Their vets will not talk to one another. I can tell you in North Carolina that's no longer the case. These guys have breakfast together and share information with the okay of their bosses because it pays to do that. What we need to look at is integrated farm measures, manage traffic flow. So that is basically using the technology we would use when we have a problem, but when we don't have it, to avoid having the problem as much as possible, have good communication for specific conditions or situations, and focus on compliance. Because until we've done a good job there, I'm not convinced that we need to do an awful lot more to keep AI out of there. Thank you very much.